G'day, Suzie. My name's Caitlin Johnston. I've got Suzie Dawson here with me. She's a citizen journalist. She's a Kiwi. She's a activist, blogger, and she's in exile now. G'day, Suzie. You're all the way from Moscow. Hi.
G'day, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. Thanks for spending some time with me. You've got you're going for Prime Minister of New Zealand now.
Yes, in the unlikely event that Internet Party, my political party, achieved a majority in the election, yes, I would be Prime Minister. In reality, we are hoping for 5%, which would get us 3 members of Parliament.
Now, what would 3 members of Parliament mean?
It would mean that myself is number one on the party list, and our second and third candidates on the party list would also get into Parliament.
Right. Can you explain a little bit about the New Zealand parliamentary system? So is it a two-party system? Is it that locked down, or are they, what's
It's not meant to be, but it really is. So we have MMP, which means we have 120 members of Parliament, and they are divided across every party who achieves a minimum of 5% of the party votes. Or the candidates can also be selected by their electorate. Internet Party itself has chosen not to stand in the electorates, but is just standing on the strength of the party list, because we don't want to be the 20 or 50 votes that allows a government minister to retain their seat in the electorates. Yeah.
Right. So there's a little bit of strategy involved here. But, so you're now, but you're in Moscow.
Correct.
Are you in Moscow?
I'm in Moscow because I have been pretty relentlessly persecuted by people who are opposed to my work, my activism and my journalism. Originally in New Zealand over a number of years, and as that escalated in seriousness, I then relocated to Berlin in Germany. Unfortunately, the targeting followed me there and continued, and eventually I discovered that it wasn't until I got into Eastern Europe that all of a sudden the targeting stopped. So I eventually applied for asylum here in Russia and have been living here since.
So what horrible things are you doing to be targeted?
Well, initially it was involvement with the Occupy movement, which we now know was targeted by the FBI and the DHS in the United States, and through their fusion centres worked in conjunction with intelligence agencies across the Western world to crush and suppress key figures who were involved in the movement. Then, because of revelations of illegal spying by our intelligence agencies in New Zealand, I became heavily involved in a campaign to try to prevent those abuses of the intelligence agencies. We called it the GCSB movement, after the GCSB, Government Communications Security Bureau, who is the New Zealand equivalent of the NSA, or the equivalent of, the Aussies. Canada, UK, US, everyone has their own NSA equivalent agency. That movement became very big in New Zealand, and spread to dozens of towns and cities, and became a really big deal. It looked at one point like we really had a very fair shot at shutting down what they were doing. Unfortunately, the legislation called the GCSB bill that they invented to retroactively legalise their illegal activity did pass through Parliament by one vote. But we were doing everything that we could to prevent that from happening and to hold them accountable for their abuses. So my involvement in that definitely didn't please them. Then there was a number of other movements and issues that I was involved in at the same time and in the following years. And certainly my support for whistleblowers and WikiLeaks and organisations like that probably compounded things. But then it was in the 2014 general election when I was actively supporting Kim.com and the Internet Party that things started to get really crazy. That was about the same time as we hosted Snowden and Greenwald in New Zealand in August 2014.
Right. So, but none of these are criminal activities.
Exactly right. None of them are criminal activity. I did not break a single law, and in fact, every activity that I was involved in is a democratically protected right, a protected democratic right, both in international law and according to the New Zealand Bill of Rights.
Well, in fact, and I would say that you were working in the highest interest of humanity. It's not that you weren't just not committing crimes. You're actually doing things to help people.
I was trying my damnedest. This is true.
So you're being targeted for helping people.
Yes, I was being targeted for trying to hold the government and its agencies to account. And unfortunately, some of those agencies have very strong military international ties and were affiliated with targets of international agencies. So where things got particularly serious is that we have learned since that those of us who were targeted by my government were referred by my government directly to the NSA in Hawaii in 2012 and were targeted by the NSA from the year 2012.
Right. So you actually made a particularly chilling video. It's about an hour long, I think, but I watched every minute of it. It details why the way that you've been tracked and targeted, and the sorts of methods and strategies they've used to try and intimidate you into silence, to defame your character, to kill your character first, and then actually to try and kill your body. There were assassination attempts as well. But it's become quite a common thing now. It's, you have a profile, but I get a lot of feedback from people who just read me and have, part-time activists and stuff like that who've had similar weird, creepy experiences. And I'd just like you to talk a little bit about them, because some of them are, a lot of them are designed just to make you feel paranoid, or make you sound paranoid at least. One particularly that caught my ear was the socks, the white. Can you tell that story?
Sure. I mean, there are so many examples of things like that happened to me. There's only a couple that I talk about in the documentary just because I needed to keep it short. But I can tell you story after story after story about the invasions of my personal space, and what I would describe as the desecration of my personal property and belongings. So the story you're referring to is, I explain in the video that they try to do things to you which you can't achieve any redress for, and which you sound a bit crazy if you try to explain to people that this is happening to you. And these are specifically designed for that purpose. So they at the height of the targeting, they were breaking into my house constantly. So I'll tell you the sock story, but I'll tell you a couple of other things I didn't mention in the video. So on one occasion, I went to sleep with my cell phone literally next to me, within a meter of my body, and woke up and my cell phone was gone. Okay, well, that's fine. My cell phone's missing. Can't find it anywhere. That's fine. Go and buy a new phone. go back to sleep with my phone in my room. Wake up and my phone is gone. This happened to me 3 times in a month. Okay, so my cell phones just get up and walk away. Okay, fine and good. I would come home, and the sock story is that I simply bought a 3-pack of sports socks, like you do, for like $5 from the warehouse down the road, and I left it on top of my dresser in my bedroom, unopened, just sitting there. And then I came home. Then this was very frequent for me, where I would come home and there'd be some bizarre disturbance that's unexplainable. And I came home into my room, And sitting on top of my dresser, like my unopened package of socks is gone, vanished, but sitting on top of my dresser is a pair of disgusting, sweaty men's socks. And there was no man living in my house. There's literally no possible, feasible way that my unopened socks could have walked themselves out of the house and some random men's socks show up sitting on my dresser. But this is the type of thing that they do, because you can't go to the police and say, someone stole $5 of socks off me and now there's some dirty men's socks inexplicably on my dresser. That's not something I can put in a police report and expect the police department to do something about, right?
Right.
Another horrific one that happened to me was that they actually cut through the side seams of every single pair of my underwear, so that only just the elastic at the top is intact, but all of the cloth has been split. And I wouldn't know until I'd actually put it on and be walking around and it falls apart while it's on my body. They've done this, and then I would go to get another pair from my drawer and then discover that the same thing had been done to that. And it was quite a remarkable moment for me on my YouTube channel. Someone else who'd been targeted, a woman, complained in the comment section that all of the underwire of her bras had been removed from her bras, like in her underwear drawer. And when I read that, I was like, holy crap, because the same thing happened to me.
Wow.
They removed the underwire from all of my bras. And so like this is the kind of insane mental things that they do to you. I also talk in the video about how I had a very uniquely shaped antique watch that my grandmother had given me. It was like a clasp watch. It was like half bracelet, half watch. And it was really important to me because my grandmother had passed away and I used to wear it on, special occasions. And I came home and I opened my jewelry box, and everything in my jewelry box is completely intact. There's no problem with it. Nothing's missing. But my one beautiful watch is in there, and the face of it, the glass, had been completely smashed with a hammer. There's just shards of glass all through my jewelry box. So these are the kind of like destructive, despicable things that they would do.
Sounds like,
yeah.
this is what abusive husbands do to their. You're in an abusive.
Yes, and it really is like that. I was just thinking that today, actually. I was thinking, like, how terrifying and traumatizing it can be for someone to have a stalker?
Yeah.
To go through being stalked. Well, imagine that they're being stalked by a team of stalkers that work in concert together and that are protected by the state and by the government, and that have endless access to resources, and that are actively trained in these mind-fucking tactics, excuse my language, but that's really what it is, because they're actually trying to send you nuts. They're trying to send you crazy. And the more that I studied about this happening to other people, things started to make more and more sense for me, because a lot of the things I went through, I didn't put two and two together till afterwards. For example, I used to have like loose screws, like on window panes and on the floor, and like scattered all around my house. And I just thought to myself, oh, my house must just be really old and crappy, like that there's just screws falling out everywhere. Like it never actually occurred to me that it had anything to do with being targeted. Right. At all. I just thought, okay, it's just a bit strange, but it made no sense to me that it would be related to the targeting. And then when I was reading through some of the tactics of these groups, they said that they leave loose screws all around your house because they're alluding to you having a screw loose. Like you're going crazy, you have a screw loose. But I was too stupid to even put that two and two together when they were doing it to me.
Yeah, but I mean
some of the tactics just went straight over my head,
Well, good. Yeah. Well, that's diabolical, isn't it? That is just like so evil. And then to target someone who literally is just trying to do some good for the world. Like you're not out there like trying to bomb people or like create it, or you're not hurting anyone. And in fact, you weren't even doing it for Like, you certainly weren't doing it for money, but you weren't even doing it
No,
for,
hell no.
you were anonymous for like quite some time too. Like,
Yeah.
this is just out of the goodness of your heart, just trying to help, and you're being targeted. And I think it is important that we start talking about this, because it is quite common. It's becoming more common. One of the things that really amazed me to find out was that a lot of these are private contractors, that it's become, these aren't necessarily trained people by the state or anything through, the like legitimate kind of courses or whatever. These literally could be just mercenary type people who have access, as you say, to the most amazing resources now. And because it's a business, they have to create more business. So they have to they have to create more targets. And are they going to like create more targets out of dangerous people, like, that actually might turn around with a Kalashnikov or something? And no, they're going to target soft people who, like us, who are just trying, who would have no idea how to handle a gun or anything like that, or would pose no problem to them.
Yeah, it's extremely extensive. So Nicky Hager, who's worked with WikiLeaks, he's a famous investigative journalist from New Zealand, an amazing journalist. He wrote a book called Dirty Politics in 2014 about some parts of the government targeting programs as related to media. And he says that he found evidence that dozens of journalists had been targeted to have their reputations destroyed, to have their lives ruined. Some of them had been maliciously referred to child services and other types of things like this, like completely with, there's groundless accusations that are made just to harm them in their personal life and to harm them professionally. In New Zealand, when I was trying to understand what was happening to me, I went to a number of high-profile activists and so-called radicals and told them what was happening and asked them, like, what on earth do I do about this? And I talked to one very amazing investigative journalist who told me that when he was working on a famous story in New Zealand that was very embarrassing for the government, that he had a bullet shot through the top of his car, like the driver's side of his car. And I talked to an ex-member of parliament who was on the so-called radical left. And I said to her, but you're an MP, right? They couldn't target you when you're an MP. And she said that the morning after she was no longer an MP, the targeting started again. That she was safe while she was an MP, but literally the morning after she was no longer an MP, she was considered fair game. So this has obviously been going on for, a number of years. But you're completely right that it's becoming more pervasive and through different areas of society, because now we see like climate researchers being targeted. We see scientists and doctors, even like there were like anti-sugar campaigners, being targeted. There's like GMO activists, anti-GMO activists being targeted. And I just feel like with some of the laws that have been passed in New Zealand, that they are preparing the ground for the entire civilian population to eventually be targeted in one way or another. What I'm referring to specifically is they have passed a law which allows what they call domestic visual surveillance, and domestic visual surveillance without a warrant. And what that means is that they can put cameras inside your house where you live. Because I absolutely 100% was on being filmed inside my home. They weren't just breaking in and meddling with my stuff. They were installing surveillance devices and monitoring me inside my home. And now in New Zealand, it's supposedly legal. The law says it's legal. It's completely immoral, but it is in fact legal for them to plant cameras inside your home without a warrant. And I just don't know how to scream about that loudly enough, because that is Orwell. Right. It's not Orwell's coming, it's Orwell is here. They're doing it now. Warrantless surveillance inside your home. So how long until that is just blanket by default? There's no monitoring for it. We still don't know who the targets are. Like the government was forced to admit that 88 New Zealanders were referred to the NSA, were targeted and referred to the NSA. to this day, we only know who 2 of them are. I've been fighting the spy agencies directly, trying to get them to admit that I was one of the targets, and they still refuse to admit it. They refuse to confirm or deny. So this is like an ongoing mystery. If you can't prove that it was you, then you can't achieve any redress or seek any justice. So all I can really do is try to tell people what's going on and what happened to me, and hope that I can provide some sanity for someone else who's going through it and who can. That's why actually at the bottom of my documentary, I specifically ask people to share it with anyone who also is having similar experiences. Because once you begin to understand that this is a methodology, that this practice is applied to many people, that it's not just you going through it, it empowers you to cope with it so much better.
Right. Well, they are trying to isolate you, and the typical gaslighting techniques is to make you feel isolated and crazy. So then, hopefully, I guess that their idea is to institutionalize you in some way. But otherwise, it's just disruption techniques, so that you're not able to work as effectively, like you're distracted by things, and you're worried about like whether or not you're doing the right thing, etc. Worried about the people around you, whether or not you're putting them in danger, etc., etc. Just to run into.
For me, they made my home feel like a prison.
Right.
It felt like I was in a prison, and it felt like there would never be any end to it. I couldn't imagine, because it went on for years. Like 2011 until January 2015, I left New Zealand. Even it continued after that. But that's what they do. They make you believe that you're trapped, and that there's no escape from it, and that you'll be subjected to this for the remainder of your life. And I think that's what's so damaging, or can be so damaging. And I really believe that we need a full-blown public inquiry into every single target of the agencies. We need to see who it is they've been targeting, what grounds they've been targeting them on, what actions they've been taking against them, and what's happened to these targets. How many of them have killed themselves? How many of them have ended up in a mental hospital? How many of them have lost their relationships, their jobs, their homes, their careers, their houses? Yeah. How many? Because I believe that it's probably a huge number, especially stacked up across the decades.
Right. Well, yeah. But I do think also that one of the strategies that we can employ right now is to start talking about it and start sharing what is happening, because those strategies are lessened in intensity if people are actually just laughing at them. The screw loose, etc. These kinds of things that they want to make you feel crazy and isolated. But if there's a community of people being targeted, that will actually join them together, which is exactly what they don't want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I think the hardest thing for me actually was becoming safe again. It took me about 6 months to truly let it sink in that I'm okay, that no one is following me, that no one is violating my space, that I'm safe again. At least 6 months it took me, because you feel like any minute, any day it could start again. Right. And so there's this you kind of try to protect yourself, don't get too comfortable in safety because it can be taken away like that. But yeah, eventually you get there. But look at what I had to do to actually get to that point. It's come at the price of almost everything I own and access to my family and friends. But I do finally live free now. I do finally live unmolested, and that is priceless. I mean, it really is. It's horrible, but as much as I love my country and I love my family and I miss my friends and I miss everything, the beach, I miss my city, I miss so much stuff, I wouldn't go back there. And a second unless I knew for a fact 100% that I was safe, because you just can't live like that. It's
That's a
impossible
nightmare.
to live with someone undermining every facet of your life, deliberately and methodically every single day. And it's horrible to think how many people are still going through it.
Is there a possibility if you get the 5% and you become an MP in the Parliament, does that mean that you will, because that will effectively make you under their protection, won't it?
That is the greatest irony. The greatest irony is that the same security budget that was undoubtedly paying the bills to persecute me somewhere up the chain would then have to be spent to provide me with security, with housing, with travel, etc., as an MP. So that is the greatest irony of all, that the people who have persecuted the hell out of me would become responsible for my safety.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. That said, from the lived experience of other people, the day after I was no longer an MP, it could start all over again. So who knows?
Well, but that would mean that you could move home for the time being, move back with your family, and perhaps be in a position to attack some of these spy bills that are going unnoticed, basically.
Well, I think we're doing a pretty good job of that at the moment. I'm pretty happy with how things are going. If you look at #anti-spy bill on Twitter, we've been having weekly events with some amazing people working alongside us to directly tackle, to educate people about, but also to design legislation to counter the specific egregious violations in each of the 5 or 6 pro-spying bills that have been passed in New Zealand in recent years. So one thing that many people don't realise is the way that this legislation tracks around the world. So you had the GCSB bill in New Zealand in 2013, you have the Aussie Data Retention Act, you have the UK IP bill, you have the United States USA Freedom Act, etc., the CSEC, C51, etc. So once they get away with passing this legislation in one of the Western countries,
right,
it spirals around the rest of them. So by trying to push for a countermeasure in one country, we want to try to start the same domino effect where activists in each of the other countries can push for adoption of similar legislation for themselves.
Okay, because I guess, yeah, and they also, under things like Five Eyes, collaborate with, if their country can't do it, then they just get another country to do it for them, etc. So it
Absolutely.
does need a full push by all the Western nations. Well, thanks so much for your time, Suzie. I really wish you well. 9 days' time is the election.
Yeah.
We'll see how we go. But meanwhile, I'm really pleased that you're using your platform to attack this evil. It can only be called evil.
Absolutely. And for us at Internet Party, it's actually not about the election or the votes. We took a huge stand against the spying in 2014, and we have again in 2017. And we're committed to continuing in 2020, 2023, 26, and we will just keep stabbing away at it for as long as it takes, because these issues are not going away. The Snowden taught the world a lot with his revelations, but it still remains for the world to really push back and push the pendulum the other way. And that's what we're really committed to doing. But if you want to, I'll just give a little plug. If you want to support us, we would love your support. And you can check out internet.org.nz, or NZ for the Americans.
Yeah, I totally 100% support you, and I'm pushing the pendulum with you, man.
Your work is amazing. Okay, it really is.
Thanks, Suzie. All right, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much.